Welcome to this TSD Mindfulness recording of teaching number 1 of the TSD Mindfulness teachings. The first teaching is the TSD Mindfulness objective is to move into perfect relationships. So first, I'm going to start out with a brief explanation of mindfulness. The practice of mindfulness is to pay attention to either the sounds in your environment, the physical sensations in your body, your breath, which is a combination of sound and your physical sensations, or to pay attention to, with your eyes open, to something and some type of object. And mindfulness is paying attention to your thoughts and your emotions. And the last thing is mindfulness is also paying attention to the way that you're paying attention. Are you paying attention non-judgmentally, or are you paying attention with more judgment? Are you paying attention with focus, or are you more distracted? Are you paying attention with some emotions, or are you more, do you have equanimity in your attention? So that is the general definition of mindfulness. TSD mindfulness includes many of the traditional mindfulness techniques, but it also has some of its own philosophy, and it also incorporates techniques for soothing your nervous system. And there is a big stress on self-compassion. So all of these teachings that I'm going over in these videos are covered in the book, Tame, Soothe, Dwell, the 55 Teachings of TSD Mindfulness. And you can purchase that book in ebook form on the website, tsdmind.org. So let's jump right in with the first teaching. Again, it is the TSD Mindfulness objective is to move into perfect relationships. So let's look at that word relationships. What does that mean? Relationships are these interdependencies that include the relationship with yourself, with other people, with food, with money, with God, if you are spiritual in that way, really with anything. Our relationship with all the different things in our experience. And so let's also break down the word perfect. What do we mean by perfect? Perfect isn't necessarily what you imagine perfect to be, because this perfection that TSD refers to is not based on your personal expectations, but instead is based on and defined by a system larger than you. So let me tell a story to illustrate that. Years ago, I was at a friend's house and I wanted to do my daily meditation. And at that point, the way that I was meditating is I would meditate with eyes open and look at my stacked stones. But I didn't have my stacked stones with me, so I wanted to find something that I could look at for my meditation. And I always like to pick something from nature. So I found some wood chips that were from the guinea pig cage, but from the clean bag. I took them from the clean bag. So I took a couple handfuls of the wood chips and I just kind of dropped them on the table to look at. And I sat there with my eyes open and did my meditation. And, it just looked kind of like a messy pile of wood chips. But something really miraculous happened. About 20 minutes into my meditation, I was looking at the wood chips and they started to look so beautifully organized. It started to look as if each wood chip was especially set in that place. And I was just in awe of the beauty of how these wood chips fell into their places. And so that's the kind of perfection that I'm talking about. On first glance, it might look messy. It might not look perfect. But when we get into our state, our meditative state, we see the perfection in it. So again, the TSD mindfulness objective is to move into perfect relationships. As outlined by the TSD mindfulness teachings, you move into these perfect relationships by taming your mind, soothing your gut, and dwelling in your heart. So that's where the TSD comes from, taming your mind, soothing your gut, and dwelling in your heart. Take a moment and consider what you have relationships with in your life. What aspects are in your life that you have relationships with? So we're really asking, what are the aspects of your life? Because you have relationships with everything that's in your life. Is it alcohol? Is it time? Is it money? Is it yourself? Is it structure or lack of structure? What are those relationships that you have? Maybe take out a piece of paper and write down about 5 different relationships that you can think of that you have. We tame our mind by noticing the subtleties of our environment. So what sounds do you hear? What sights do you see? What physical sensations are you experiencing? When we focus on this, our attention on these present moment elements, our thoughts settle and our mind becomes more quiet. And traditionally, we do this during a sitting meditation practice, but you could do it. You could take a few minutes out of your day and just simply sitting at your desk or wherever you are, and you could do this type of practice also. But mostly when I'm speaking about these teachings, I'm referring to the sitting meditation practice. So I have a question for you to consider again. Why do we focus on these elements? Why do we focus on the sounds in our environment? Why do we focus on the physical sensations in our body? What is the advantage? Why is this helpful for us? Why does this tame our mind? Why does this slow down our thoughts? So here's a few ideas. It does affect your brain chemistry in a positive way, right? So it just helps you feel better. It allows your neural pathways to kind of open up, meaning we often get in these ruts in our neural pathways. When things come up, we process it in the same exact way each time. We use the same neural pathways, the same tracks to process through an emotion or something that happens that we need to work through. But if you practice mindfulness, what starts to happen is those neural pathways open up more, and we might not always process something the way that we always did. It opens us up to processing things in different ways. And sometimes these different ways are healthier and they feel better. When you practice mindfulness, your cerebellum structure in your brain actually grows. There's studies that show this. If you practice mindfulness for 20 minutes a day for 6 months, you can actually see structure changes in your brain. And cerebellum is just one of them. But the reason I mention the cerebellum is because the cerebellum is what we use to process our emotions. And so when that thickens and gets stronger, then we actually have better brain power to process our emotions. I'd also like to mention microstates. Microstates are when we use a neural network for 120 milliseconds or longer. So we have about 5 different neural networks in our brain, and we generally jump from one to the other. We're in one, we jump to another, we jump to another and another. But a microstate is when we actually stay in one for this 120 milliseconds or longer. And with mindfulness meditation, the research does show that we stay in those microstates. We engage in microstates more often, and we engage in them for longer periods of time. We don't have enough research to know exactly what that means, but I think we can use common sense to realize that that's probably why we're having all of these positive benefits from our meditation practice. So once your mind is tamed, you might notice that your gut is acting up. So this is what happens a lot when people start practicing TSD mindfulness meditation. Their mind starts to quiet a little bit, and then they're able to tune more into their gut sensations and notice that their nervous system is actually engaged when they didn't really know that it was. So this is because when your mind is quiet, you can better tune into those subtleties of your gut. You might pick up on physical tightness in your gut area or anxious thoughts that develop in your mind. These are all indicators that our nervous system is triggered. And so if we soothe our gut by reassuring ourselves that in the present moment we are safe, if we reassure ourselves that there are things going on right now that are very stable, then this really helps soothe your nervous system. So those are some of the techniques that we're going to be practicing. The reason that using reassurance about safety and stability are helpful for soothing your nervous system or your gut is because your gut fears change. And so if your gut, that part of us realizes that things are actually pretty stable, there's not like going to be a huge change in this moment, then our nervous system will feel better. And this fear of change that the gut experiences is a big contrast to our mind, because our mind desires change. So in our mind, we really want things to change. In our gut, we really want things to stay the same. So we're kind of in this dichotomy. It can feel kind of like a tug and pull sometimes. The thoughts and physical sensations instigated by your mind and gut distract us from what's happening in our hearts. So that's the other thing to realize here, is that if we want to have this meditation practice where we really move into our hearts, what's making that difficult sometimes is all this activity in our mind, and then this activity in our gut can be very distracting for us to really move into our hearts. So if we can tame our mind and we can soothe our gut, we can much more easily just dwell in our heart. So moving your consciousness into your heart is a monumental step towards perfect relationships. So that's the connection there, right? We're talking about these perfect relationships, moving into these perfect relationships. And we can do that better when we tame our mind, soothe our gut, and move our consciousness into our heart with this TSD mindfulness meditation practice. So that's the conclusion of teaching number 1.